Welcome to the Alchemy Within, the podcast where human wisdom meets the art of growth and personal evolution. Join me, Leilah Mirza, as we explore the profound journey of transformation, diving deep into the practices, stories, and insights that ignite change and awaken your true potential.
We are recording. Amazing. Hello. Welcome to the Alchemy Within, a podcast which aims to help transform people's lives and worlds within. I'm Leilah Mirza, and welcome. Today's special guest is Lauren from Born Energy. Welcome to Lauren from Born Energy, a former registered ICU neonatal ICU nurse and baby soul communicator. Lauren has a background in working in ICU, neonatal ICU, and has cared for over 7,000 critically unwell babies. Welcome today, Lauren from Born Energy, and thank you so much for joining me today. I'm so excited to have you on the show.
Thank you, Leilah. It's great to be here.
Amazing. Lauren, please tell us a little bit about you and what you do.
Sure. Well, yeah, as you mentioned in your intro, I was a registered nurse for over 20 years. I am still registered, but no longer practicing. I spent the majority of that 20-year career in the neonatal intensive care unit, which is where the babies go that have the toughest start to life in whichever way that may be. And I'd always wanted to be a nurse and look after the babies. That was something that I would say to people, even in primary school, 10 or less years of age. So it was something that also was really unique. There was no one in my family who was a nurse. There was no one in my family who worked with children or babies. So it was something that was quite intuitive in me from quite a young age, even though nobody kind of recognized that, I guess. And then, fast forward until I was 23, and then I got my first job working in the nursery. Needed to do further training, etc., in order to do that. And then I spent the next 17 years or so working with these tiny premature babies, and also babies who were very unwell for whatever reason and required intensive care. So as someone who is naturally very sensitive and tends to be quite empathic and can really sense other people and their energy and their emotions, I found working in the neonatal ICU a very draining process and a very intense job. Not just physically with the shift work and all of these things, but emotionally with the work I was doing with caring for these critically unwell babies and their parents in what is the toughest time for many of them of their lives to date. Having a baby in intensive care is not part of any parent's plan. So it was this constant exposure to trauma and to the very edge of life and death, which for some reason when it comes to babies and children, that can add a whole other layer and level of emotional intensity to the soul leaving the earth when it's a child or a baby. And so again, fast forward to my early 30s, I had been working in neonatal ICU for around 8 years, and I was done. I was emotionally, mentally, psychologically, energetically, everything drained, burnt out, didn't want to do it anymore. But because I'd always been a nurse, I went to university straight from school, so I hadn't done anything else. I decided to go off and do some extended traveling, and that's when over in Africa, and that's when things started to really shift for me, when I had a whitewater rafting accident in Zambia. And I didn't realize at the time, because I was very left-brained, not spiritual at all, very much in my science brain, show me the research, show me the evidence. And I had this near-death experience, which I thought was a panic attack at the time, but my awareness or consciousness did split in two, which is something I didn't understand or take much notice of at the time. And then when I came back from Africa, things just started to shift on a subtle level for me. Like I started being interested in yoga and meditation and energy healing and different types of alternative spiritual therapies. And yeah, and then in, I think it was 2016, 2017, like my worlds literally collided, where I was doing a night shift one night at one of the major hospitals where I lived, and a baby literally started talking to me. And I thought I was going crazy. I thought I didn't understand what was happening. I thought I had just done too much shift work, too much overtime, just needed a break. And so I took a break. But when I went back to work, I just started, the experiences just started intensifying. And it went from seeing pictures around babies to hearing them speak to feeling things in my body, and then finding out later that they correlated with some sort of blood test or ultrasound or MRI or some kind of scan that
Wow.
it was like, it blew my mind, because my left brain, my science brain, my clinical brain couldn't understand what was happening. But because I'd started dabbling in these spiritual practices, I was starting to think, okay, there's more going on here than what I've given these babies credit for. And so even though I ignored them for a while because it was weird, I couldn't say anything, right? I was working in a hospital with doctors and nurses, so it's not the conversation you have in the tea room on your break. But eventually, after a year or so, I did start listening to these babies and just being curious about what they were trying to share, what they were trying to tell me. And then over a period of time, it completely changed how I cared for these babies, how I spoke to them, how I handled them, how I touched them. I would look at their heart monitor and say different things to them or handle them in different ways and notice the effects it would have on their heart rate and their breathing and all of these things, because my left brain needed some kind of evidence. Yeah. And then it was a very interesting experience trying to look like a normal registered nurse, but at the same time, sort of having a foot in each world, which, towards the end became quite a challenge, and also not being able to share the information I was receiving with those who needed it most, which was the parents of these babies. And I look back now and I'm like, if I was able to share what these children were telling me, then it would have really, really helped these parents on many levels with their baby's journey in neonatal ICU. So that was eventually what pushed me to take the leap to leave the hospital system. And so now I can share the information freely, as I said, with those who need it most, their parents. So yeah, so it's been quite the journey.
Wow, Lauren, that story gave me goosebumps. It really gave me goosebumps because I'm a parent, and anyone who is a parent would have that soft spot thinking and taking back to your own children and their earlier experiences. And I can truly understand where you say, the overwhelm of being highly sensitive, like I am myself too. It can be quite draining and quite tiring, right? If you don't know how to process the stuff and you're trying
Yeah.
to kind of make sense of what's happening on your own internal radars. What a great story, and a path in your life, and a gift that you are. This is beautiful, and it's opened up so many questions for me that I
Yeah.
really want to ask you.
Yeah, let's
Out
do
of
it.
out of curiosity, Lauren, because I'm sure there are parents whose children has had a tough start. Now, I am a therapist, and I'm also a holistic therapist, and I truly believe a lot of this, we speak about nature and we speak about nurture, but I also truly believe that the way a child is birthed into the world has an impact on their lives. Now, I have four children, and all of them were born via C-section. I am a very small frame. My grandma is Chinese, so we're quite small down there. And
Mm-hmm.
I remember my fourth, the twin, was born after the first twin. Georgia, when she came out, Sage came out sleeping, almost like quite tired, and Georgia came out, and I remember that they took her away from me and they said they needed to monitor her breathing. She was in distress after her sister came out and then Georgia came out. She was in distress. She turned around in my tummy and they needed to keep they needed to monitor her really. And I remember me looking at my husband asking, is she okay? What is going on? It was a healthy pregnancy. She was very active. And they said, yeah, she's okay. But her temperature and her heart rate was up and down. And that made me think, I wonder, is this going to have an impact on her personality, on her soul path, especially with the other babies called Sage. For many reasons, I love that name, Sage, the archetype of wisdom for the women. And I was just thinking, I wonder if they had that soul contract and then this birth experience. Do babies who have the start, what would you say to that? Who have this interesting start to their life?
Yeah, look, absolutely. If there's anything that I learned is there's no easy answer. But what I have learned is that babies when it comes to birth, it's a much more, I guess, unpredictable, if you want to think of birth as a portal or it's literally where the veil is thin and it's like, the entrance of this soul that's really fully landing on the earth. And so on the energetic level, it's a huge transition, and I see it as this portal, like literally this window between worlds. And what happens with that window between worlds, I've come to learn, is it's very unpredictable. There are so many factors, there's so many variables that can happen. It's often quite unpredictable, even for the soul coming to the earth. And so what I've learned, though, what I've come to understand is there is a degree of planning involved. And interesting, like often with babies who are born by cesarean, in my experience, it's often, not always, but it is often their choice to do so. There's a lot of benefits on the soul's journey or from the soul's perspective to a cesarean over a vaginal birth. Not that I'm advocating that over another. It's just very different for different souls. Okay. It's just, just trying to acknowledge that, every soul has their own journey. And sometimes that is planned, and sometimes it's a result of the flow of life and how things unfold, which even souls can't always predict, or they tend to have an idea of the possibilities that lay ahead. There's different timelines, but they don't always know exactly how that's going to play out until it does. So so going back to your question, absolutely, the birth and those moments after birth and all the moments beyond that do have an impact on babies, but in my experience, it starts well before that. And I'm even learning that the energy of conception for some babies has a much bigger impact on their life even than birth for some children, not all, but for some as well. Ooh. So that energy around conception and what's going on, like energetically, emotionally, astrologically, numerologically, you can bring all these different layers into the energy. But I'm finding there's been a shift, I would say, in the last 5 years maybe, where I'm finding babies tend to be more focused on their energy of conception, even more so than the energy of their birth. But understanding that, there is absolutely an impact and effect, like there has been for all of us in our own birth, but also, in the time that follows that as well.
Wow, that is so interesting. So interesting. I love this because as much as so I work with adults in therapy, and these adults are overcoming their childhood stuff, whether it's beliefs around parents, what the trauma, I'm not enough, being abandoned, neglected, whatever that is. But even as I'm going through the processes of understanding, I couldn't work with children just because, although I have this curiosity, I'm super sensitive. So you have a lot of strength and to hold that container, you must be quite robust within. So that's much appreciated. And you took me back to speaking about conception. And actually, that made me slightly happy because then I thought, yeah, they were definitely born out of love, because I tell my children, you're born out of love, and you come with purpose. And I remember my experience with my little girls, the twin girls, because I've had these girls later in my life. I was 38 when I was pregnant. I gave birth at 39. But during the period when they were born, and I actually put this on my social media, so people are watching will remember, I used to massage my tummy with crystals. My children used to touch, the older children used to touch my tummy and talk to the babies and connect. And I remember Sage, who I really feel is an old soul. And I told my husband, by the way, I'm going to tell Lauren about this, because I'm sure Lauren will understand this language, because it's like old soul. And I was like, Sage is an old soul, because when I used to do the healing on my tummy, I used to listen to lots of mantras and, ask to have healing go through the womb, mother womb healing, connect to healing. And Sage used to kick whenever I used to put the crystals on. And and even since I tell you right now, my skin goes all goosebumpy, because I remember how Sage I used to really feel really connected with them through that feeling.
Yeah.
I mean, they're lovely girls,
Yeah.
they are really lovable girls. And I definitely do believe whatever happens in your energy and in your environment has that impact on
Yeah.
those children.
Yeah. Yeah, 100%. It's, today's children are very sensitive. They're coming to the earth very, very connected to their souls. Years ago, generations ago, even hundreds of years ago, centuries ago, that connection did not survive very well, that birth portal and that transition to earth, and for good reason. In those really harsh times of humanity, if you remained really strongly connected and remembered where you came from, like imagine being here on earth in some of these really challenging times. So it was actually helpful for us to forget, or at least our spirit home, if you like, becoming more distant or a little bit more disconnected from that. Whereas in today's world and today's children, they're coming through very connected. And yes, they're right. You're right. Like, these kids are old souls, and there's many different definitions around that, which, I can share if you'd like to, but it's more like, they are coming through with their own sense of wisdom, and their own knowledge and their own experiences. They're not, like I used to think, they were these clueless, innocent little beings that landed on the earth. I've learned that they have a whole soul history. They're bringing this wisdom, this knowledge, their understanding. And they're actually, what I'm finding is that today's children, which is different to, say, 5 or 10 years ago, are coming to teach us a lot more than what we are here to teach them, if that makes sense, because they have this connection, they have this wisdom, this knowledge, that they're here to make really big changes as a collective wave, if you like, of souls coming onto the earth at this time, and also in the coming years. It's going to continue to really change things here on earth and really shake things up. These are the souls that are coming to make big changes to systems and education and healthcare and spirituality even, and beliefs and energy. Today's children are very energetically connected, very intuitive, like super, and very gifted with this knowledge and healing and all of these things. So even, as I feel Sage's energy, like I can sense that in her soul. It's like this ancient, almost feels like this ancient lineage of energy and wisdom, and like it almost feels like mysterious, but like in a loving, like what's the word? It's hard sometimes putting the words to like the energy that I feel, but it's like these hidden secrets that are coming through to be shared with the world. And there's a lot of kids like that at this point who are doing that, but they're bringing their own version of, I keep sort of going back to the word wisdom to share, because, things do need to change on the earth, and they are changing. And so this next wave are just really helping to build on that and to really expand the shifts and the changes that we're already heading towards. So yeah, they're incredibly powerful, these kids.
Wow. Lauren, this is so beautiful. I feel really emotional because everything that you say, it's just, I can see that. And I don't know if I can see that because I'm also thinking, when you're speaking about these children, I'm thinking of our children, this generation, although they are quite different to our generation, but equally it's then taken me back as you're talking to me being a child. And this is why I said, actually, this does make a lot of sense, because I'm trying to, kind of, bring this into a perspective, or create this container of perspective, having this inner clarity over here. And what I remember as a child, so I was born in an environment, and it was not good, right? There's domestic violence, abuse, sexual abuse, trauma. It was just quite intense. And I remember feeling that as a child. I remember feeling that, and I remember questioning my purpose in this world. I remember all of those things. I won't say I remember things back in my mother's womb, and I don't think I remember things very early, but I remember carrying a lot of people's emotions, and already knowing that I can see what people are thinking and feeling. That intuitive ability. Some people may say psychic, clairvoyant, clairaudient, all these different terms. I remember connecting and thinking, is everyone else thinking what I'm thinking? Because I'm just a child, right? So this is why when I talk to my children, or especially like the younger ones, I look into their eyes very deeply. And I feel almost like they have this connection with me that is almost telepathic.
Yes.
It's like we talk, and like my girls will hug me, they'll sit, they'll kiss, they talk at that same vibration through their body language as what I'm reading into their eyes. This might sound like complete gibberish for someone listening.
No. It really backs up the experiences that I've had with these children. They are incredibly powerful telepathic communicators, but some of them are not the best human communicators, like human to human. Like, as a lot of us, a lot of us here on Earth are not great communicators. We were never really taught how to communicate in healthy and effective and boundaried ways, So, whereas today's kids are coming through it, I'm smiling because they make me laugh sometimes, because they're just like saying to us, like, you just don't get it. Like, I have the most powerful, words to share, or energy to share, or wisdom to share. And in spirit, souls, well, in my experience, communicate telepathically. So these kids come here, and most adults have forgotten the ability to communicate telepathically. Whereas when parents like yourself are able to see that wisdom, absolutely through their eyes, but also receive that energy from them, it's like this whole other level of communication that goes well beyond trying to form words and sentences, which let's face it, like little kids, even if they, do have the start to learn the language and stuff, they still don't have the expanse of vocabulary to really be able to communicate. Whereas they can send energy, or send, I'd describe it as energy is probably the easiest way, to you. And it's like this sense of, and you may notice this with your girls as well, is like, it's this sense of like, there's like, they sometimes can like drop this concept into your field, your energy field, for example. And the way I see it, as it's like the old school zip files that you'd send on computers. And it's like, you get this, they send you this zip file, and then your own brain or your own energy then needs to unzip that to understand what they're trying to share. And that information can be very instantaneous, or it can be something that I call it like a slow release, where you sort of unpack, I guess, or understand pieces of what they say over a period of time, and then obviously they continue to build on that. So it's just they have this very powerful and very multi-dimensional way of communicating, which, you know, goes well beyond what general society is taught about children. That children, you know, I mean, we've moved on from the children, you know, shouldn't be seen or heard, you know, that thankfully we're moving beyond that now. But, you know, there's, you know, in times gone by, we really haven't given children the respect that they deserve from that perspective. And that's, you know, I mean, we're just talking about communication here as a whole. There's so many other layers to it. But yeah, going back to what you're saying, like they are very powerful telepathic communicators, and they get so excited when we can receive that from them, you know. So it's a lot of today's kids, you know, they're trying to communicate telepathically, but we're not hearing, you know, we're on a different wavelength, and so we can easily miss what they're saying. But if you are able to tune into these kids on the energetic level, on the soul level, it's like, yeah, you can meet each other, and you can receive them on this different level, and they just get, yeah, they get so excited about that, being able to be seen and heard in that way. So I don't know if that makes sense, but yeah.
No, it does. Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Because I think ultimately everybody wants to be seen, heard, and wants to be loved. Connection.
Yeah. Absolutely.
So Lauren, going back to what you said earlier, because I have all these questions, and this is such a world beyond the mystery. You know, it's just another world for me, and I just love this. I really do. Going beyond those questions to what you said earlier, so you've had experiences in working in neonatal and working with like critically unwell children. Obviously, that makes me quite sad. What were the conversations you were having? What were they speaking to you about?
So a lot of them were things around why they were there. You know, I think we have this belief around, and, you know, I will preface this by saying sometimes we do need to separate the human experience from the soul experience a little bit, because in my experience, like the soul perspective is like big picture. Whereas, you know, at the end of the day, we are humans here on the earth doing the day-to-day thing, right? So it's I say this not to dismiss, I guess, the very real experience of being a human and all the emotions and energy that go with that. But what I learned from these kids, you know, with the baby landing in NICU, and even I was taught to believe, well, that was wrong. Something's gone wrong. It shouldn't happen. You know, all of these things, looking for blame for different, you know, people or whatever. But what I constantly heard from these babies is they weren't surprised. They certainly weren't stressed about being in a NICU. They either knew on some level that that was going to be part of their journey, or they understood, especially because sometimes coming to the NICU was something that was planned for whatever reason, and there are many reasons why a baby would choose to start their life in a NICU. But there's also times where, just how I was talking before about the birth portal, and also the growth of the body as well. You know, it's not always predictable in pregnancy, and things can and do happen that may, you know, need to lead to a preterm delivery, or, you know, things happen in labor that may be unexpected, that may cause different emergency interventions. There's all of these things which are what I've learned. Some are known by the soul. I feel in my experience there's always a possibility just because of it's so unpredictable. But yeah, they always were very at peace with it. You know, we're resisting it and saying it shouldn't have happened, or this went wrong, or that went wrong, or if we'd done this, or if we hadn't have done that, then this would have happened, and, you know, all of these things. But when I tune into their energy, they're like, no, like, it's fine. I either knew I was coming here, or, okay, this was a little bit unexpected. Let's see where this goes. And they just want to know what's going on. They just, you know, we don't, and I was very guilty of this as a NICU nurse. Like, we don't explain to the babies what's going on. We'll explain to the parents, but we don't tell the baby, hey, like, one, you've been born. Some babies don't even realize they've been born. Tell them that they've been born, tell them that they're safe here, explain, you're in the NICU and this is what's happening, and this is, you're wearing a nappy now and you've got different tubes in you, these things like that. And I found just sharing that with these babies, there was no stress for them on the soul level. There was a deep acceptance, there was a deep surrender. There's like, okay, I don't know what's going on here, but I've landed here on earth to have an experience, and here we go. So that's one side of it. And then there's other sides where there may have been known conditions or abnormalities, different syndromes, these sorts of things. Often, when I communicated with those babies, often they were known. It was, some babies come to have a different experience of life, I guess, especially old souls who've done like the normal human experience here on earth. They're frequent flyers, they know the drill, so they think, okay, well, I'm going to come and do something different this time. I want to experience life where I'm in a body that can't hear, for example, or has some kind of physical issue. And I mean, I'm being very general here. It's every situation is very needs a deep dive into that particular soul. And also I worked a lot with social admissions as well, what you mentioned before around domestic violence and history of drug abuse, for example, and things like that. They were probably the hardest babies for me to care for, if I'm really honest. Supporting those babies, because they were, one, very difficult to look after clinically, but also when a baby's withdrawing from drugs, but also I found it really hard to care for the parents too in a compassionate, professional way. But caring for those babies and listening to what they had to say when I was finally open to hearing that really gave me so much insight into the soul's journey. And again, this sense that has been very consistent over the years around babies and, well, souls, I should say, coming here to earth to have an experience. And here on earth we very much favor good versus bad. We label things, and that's not to condone the really difficult experiences around abuse and being born addicted to drugs and things like that. We can never ever understand that and make peace with that on the human level. I haven't, and I never will, but I can start to see, like, peek behind the veil and start to understand why a soul would allow themselves, and some even choose to have an experience like that, and we can broaden that and look at what is happening now in the collective, especially in Western developed countries, where there's a lot more awareness now on domestic violence. There's a lot more support available for people who are addicted to different substances. There's a lot more, support, guidance, funding, like all of these things on a bigger social stage that, in my experience, these babies and these children and also their parents are contributing to in a collective way. So yeah, I mean, I could talk on and on about that, but yeah, they have a lot to say. Let's put it that way.
It's really actually quite sad. And most certainly as a mother, and being empathic and doing what I do, when I see children where I'm aware that their domestic situation isn't stabilized, hasn't got harmony, this is part of me that feels like I need to, look after the soul. This is part of me that it's like, this is just a little soul in this world wanting to be loved, and all this abuse, this violence, the mother being an alcoholic. And I think
Yeah.
this is just, this could be quite a lot, quite heavy for a soul.
Yeah, but also remembering that a soul is an infinite um sphere or vortex of energy. And in my experience, like the if we think of the soul as like a pie, like a big round circle, it's like coming to earth, or the human body is like one slice of that pie. So most of our soul, in my experience, but it is a little bit different for different people depending on a soul's reason for coming to earth. Some souls will bring more of their soul's energy with them to earth, especially if they do have a challenging journey ahead for whatever reason. But, at the end of the day, like the soul is so much bigger and so much more powerful than the human, in my experience.
Yeah.
Our human is like this
Yeah.
may sound weird, but the way I see it is it's like if you see the soul as an octopus, it's like being a human in a body is one leg of those eight. And so they have all of this power, all of this experience, all of this energy, a very deep connection to spirit because they're mostly still in spirit. They've got all their guides, their other beings, their soul family, all of these support around them. And it's just part of that energy that has come to the earth. And so, again, if we can start to think of these souls as being incredibly powerful, we're all incredibly powerful in our own right, in our own ways. And that's something that really helped me to sort of shift my own thinking around these situations, because as much as I don't agree with them and think they're wrong, and no kid, no child should ever be in those situations, that's what the human me is saying. The reality is that it has been happening for who knows however many hundreds, thousands years. It's going to continue to happen. And so it's like, well, this is continuing to happen, and these souls are continuing to have these experiences. Like my brain goes, well, why is that? If it's not wrong on some level beyond my own human understanding, then what is it? Like, help me to understand, because my human brain just cannot fathom that. I can't, I still, as much as I do, a soul choosing to have a life in, where there's sexual trauma, or there's some kind of, domestic violence or drug use, alcoholism, all of these things. It's like, our human brains can never condone that, can never be okay with that. And as I said earlier, like I don't feel that's the point. But where I had to go, because I was exposed to it, for 20 years, was like, well, if this is happening and continuing to happen, like, is there a reason behind this? Is there a bigger purpose or a bigger perspective here that I can tap into and use to help soften the blow a little bit, so that I can do my job without going off on sick leave all the time, or running away to Africa whenever my job got hard, these sorts of things. So
Yeah.
yeah, I don't know if that makes sense, but it's very
Yeah.
difficult, this topic.
Yeah. And yeah, it is. It's difficult, but especially where, like in my experience working with, children, not really children, but looking at situations where children were involved, and especially adults who had this experience as children. I'm certainly the adult that had to do a lot of recovery from those situations. And now that's become my profession. So I'm there to help people get through that. But going to something on a very deep level, soul contracts. So you probably know quite a lot about soul contracts as well. Like I said to you earlier, I truly believe that we all have a soul contract. And now I have a soul contract with my husband. And, our lives maybe ran in parallel prior to meeting. But then I also believe that our two little girls was in our soul contract, right? And they chose us and we chose them. On an interesting level is, let's just look at the situation with twins, or compared to singletons, because I know as a twin mum, it was quite a magical experience, birthing twins. That soul contract, it's something that I was aware, even when I met my husband, on some deep level, I, for some reason, had a knowing that we were going to have children and he was going to be the father of my children. And I remember this, but he doesn't. At some stages, I've told him if we have children, we're probably going to end up having twins. That happened. We had twins. But I knew that. And I also feel like me and him, we, on some level, like had a kingdom because we have a big family. He's got a child from another marriage, and I have two older children. So we really do have a big family. But I believe that all of this formed a soul contract. My soul contract with my girls and our soul contract for the girls came into this family, whether it was to create harmony and balance, whatever that is. And what's interesting is that our girls were his first girls in his whole family, going back to years of boys. The girls came in to the life, which I think on another level, that's also a soul contract there to change something. Now, this might sound quite triggering for anyone watching. There's Eastern European lines, and then we have South African lines. There's some ancestral stuff that's going on, and his family were born in the communist times and all of those things, which then had an impact on their beliefs, their systems, their psychological outlook in life, but then equally mine too. But I think this is why there's the girls, that's come into this family to soften things up perhaps, or to change this paradigm or the shift. So I feel like these soul contracts has a very big impact with the children and with the parents. What would you say about that?
Yeah, absolutely. And I believe we have like multiple soul contracts, like when we come to Earth with different people for different reasons and for different experiences as well. So, so we have soul contracts with partners and other people in our life. We have soul contracts absolutely with children. Siblings can have soul contracts with each other. There can be like intergenerational soul contracts as well. And, and I find different souls get pulled together in these contracts that then affect other people, in the family, mostly in families, but, perhaps even in a workplace or in a friendship group. So there's kind of like these primary people that it's almost like they're the ones that sign the contract, and then other people become part of that in a more secondary way as well. But yeah, like I do absolutely believe that there are soul contracts, especially around children, and not only just their agreement to come to Earth, but what they are prepared to, what role they're prepared to play, or what they're here to teach or learn within those contracts as well. And so, and even in, really difficult situations, these soul contracts can, as they play out, really teach, one party or the other, will give them the opportunity, I should say, to learn. We don't always learn what we come here to learn if we're not open to that, or if we're shut off from that. But generally on a soul contract, if you're here to learn about, relationships, or about connection, or about communication, then you will make these contracts with those people who can share that with you or teach that with you. And same with children, if you have a soul contract with a child, not every, I feel like there's different levels of contracts as well. There's some that feel very, very clear, very purposeful, and it's very pre-planned. And I find there's other contracts that are a little bit more, there's a little bit more room for variables in perhaps like the timing of things, or, sometimes birth order can come into that. There can be soul contracts for children to come to a set of parents, but sometimes the birth order is already known. Sometimes they might change things up a little bit depending on what's going on here on Earth. So yeah, but soul contracts are a huge part of, well, in my experience, just as being a human here on the Earth. Because there is a lot of when we bring in those contracts and they start to play out, they're often our deepest journeys as a human. They can also be our hardest journeys, like soul contracts and soul agreements are not always rainbows and unicorns. They can be, but they
Mm-hmm.
can also
Mm-hmm.
be our most challenging experiences as a human as well, which are often our most profound experiences as a soul, but brutal for the human. But yeah, absolutely, soul contracts are a big part of this journey.
Wow, that's interesting. Do you think that when a child is born, a child can change that contract upon arrival?
Depends on the soul and the contract and the reasons for that. But generally, I have to say I haven't come across a soul who has the need or the desire
Okay.
to change a soul contract that early on in their life. I think sometimes, depending on the process, there can be, certain situations where soul contracts can be cancelled or changed or deleted. I don't go too much into that because I find that tends to happen like later in life in adulthood more so than
Mm-hmm.
children.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I haven't come across a child or a baby wanting to change that. I have come across children forgetting and and teenagers, often forget soul contracts as well.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but that's not so much about the soul contract being wrong. It's about the developmental stage of the
Okay.
human, the
Okay.
the teenage years or the child,
Okay.
the more 3D Earth
Mm-hmm.
related
That's interesting.
things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What do you think about a mother who really has desires, because this is now shifting perspective from you working with the soul and now working with the parents, so understanding the parents' path and the child's path, because obviously this is your soft spot, your sweet spot over here as a children. Do you
Mhm.
know if there's a parent, let's just say you're a baby soul communicator and someone comes to you, do you ever get people coming to say, I just want to have boys or I just want to have girls? And is
Yeah.
there a reason why people are having these boys? And is there a reason why they've chosen to have girls and they only give birth to girls?
Yeah, look, it can go both ways. And what I always ask is the why, like what's behind that? Why do you want girls? It can be something that's quite intuitive, like what you were sharing with the twins and just feeling that you're going to have twins. It can be like this intuitive, like inner knowing. But sometimes when I dive deeper around that, it can actually be, for example, I'm not saying this with every woman who say desires girls, for example, but sometimes when we look a little bit deeper into that, we can find that it's because there wants to be some kind of like compensation or making up for perhaps something they didn't have as a little girl, wanting to be
Mm,
mothered in a different way. So it's kind of coming from a more wounded space rather than an
mm, mm,
intuitive space. So I always like to tune into that
mm,
first and say, well, why do you want boys? Like
mm,
what's driving you behind wanting to have girls? And it can be like what you mentioned, it can be like this intuitive knowing that, I'm going to have, twins or I'm going to have, in the range of the biological sex. It can be this inner knowing, like I feel a girl coming to me or I feel a girl around
mm.
me. It can be intuitive, but I always, yeah, have to dive deeper around that because it's not always the case that there are girls waiting. Because in my experience, like often what we as humans pick up on when we feel a baby's soul or a spirit baby around us is we're tuning into that soul's energy. That soul is not yet attached to a physical body. And so these souls are you're tuning into their soul's energy, their essence, their personality, essentially. And that doesn't always correlate with biological sex as well. And then we
Yeah.
can have
Yeah.
cases of things like gender disappointment, where I've been
Mm,
feeling a girl around me for since I was a teenager. And what do you mean I'm pregnant with a boy? And so when we tune into that soul, we can sometimes it will feel very strongly like a feminine soul. And so it makes sense, like, oh, that must mean I'm having a girl. But, the soul's energy can incarnate into either a boy or a girl. depending on their reasons for coming. It can be a feminine feeling soul who wants to explore being in a male body. And this has nothing to do with sexuality. Like, we all know kind, intuitive, gentle men in the world, and we all know very strong, driven, confident women as well. So it's not a sexuality thing. It's like, what body is going to give my soul the experience that it wants here on earth. So yeah, and yeah, it can be that girls are coming, or it can be something else. So it's not an easy answer to that question.
Yeah, okay. Now I understand that. Do you think that there's a correlation? Because when I look at it now and as you're speaking, I'm thinking of all the women who's got sons and then all the women who's got girls. Now I've got one son and I've got three girls. But when I look back at that question and as just answering the question, I'm noticing that what I'm seeing is a lot of masculine women have sons, a lot of feminine women have girls. Or is that just something that I paid attention to? Red car, green car.
Yeah, no, that it can very much happen like that. And I guess, again, it depends on these soul agreements and what the souls are coming to learn. But yeah, it makes a lot of sense. If you've got a woman, like a mother, who has done a lot of work on herself, who's perhaps been more in the masculine energy and hasn't connected with herself, hasn't done this deep inner work on herself, hasn't learned to heal her emotions. And as an adult, she goes through this process and done all of this work and learns about herself and connects with her own feminine and all of these things. I do see women that have gone on, and I think of a few pop into my mind straight away, where they've gone on to have 2 or 3 girls and no boys. And so from the soul perspective, then it makes a lot of sense that, it's like these girls have, or these souls have chosen to be girls to a mother or a woman who has done a lot of work on that feminine, so that she can guide them in their own feminine. So they don't have to be very much in their masculine. And not that there's anything wrong with that, but I'm talking more of an imbalance here. And then they don't have to wait till they're an adult to learn that feminine. Like, this woman, because she has been in that energy, in that space, can teach these little girls from an early age how to be more balanced. And I've seen the opposite as well, where women who've say been very submissive or very quiet, very shy, very not confident in themselves, and they've gone through this process of needing to actually step more into their masculine. And they do that, and as they're doing that, they go and have like a string of boys, because they're teaching them that the masculine in a healthy way, but they also have the feminine there as well to nurture these boys with their feminine energy as well. So I mean, again, it's a you could do an episode just on that, but it's a big conversation. But there's a lot around why a boy or a girl would come, or why there'd be, I remember looking after parents that had 2 boys and all they wanted was a girl, and they fell pregnant with identical triplet boys. So it was like there was not a girl to be seen, and it was, I mean, so ended up with 5 boys, and they had 2 boys and they just wanted a little girl. That's all they wanted. I mean, that was in the hospital, so I didn't have a conversation with them around, where that was coming from. But if I was to tune into like their soul's history and their journey in this life, there would be something there around the what's the word? It's like the embodiment, I guess, of the masculine and the feminine energies, and what the
Yeah,
different
that makes a
souls
lot of
in.
sense. I
Yeah,
understand. I can understand that. And to me,
yeah.
that works, it makes sense. You were speaking about this mother having 2 boys and then giving birth to triplets. Do you think there's a purpose? Because I watched this program, was it the Cleopatra? Cleopatra, and she gave birth. Did you see this movie of was it even
No.
Cleopatra? Was that the Egyptian? Oh, I'm not even going to say this and get it wrong. Well, I'm pretty sure it was Cleopatra, but I think she gave birth to twins. right? And then I was watching this on Netflix. It was a very interesting program. And obviously, she's been with different people and had children from different people, and how each child turned out was very interesting to what was happening in her life and where those two babies is gone. And this made me think, do you think people who have singletons versus twins, do you think there's a reason for this mother to bring this into the world? Because it seems like only a certain amount of people can hold that.
Yeah, I agree. Like, having multiples is not for everybody. In my experience, though, it tends to be more about the souls and the babies coming to Earth than necessarily the woman's, there's still absolutely like a purpose around multiples and
Yeah.
things like that on the soul level. But when I tune into the energy of multiples, it's often more wisdom comes through for the babies themselves, because today's children, because of their frequency, we have a lot of children coming to the earth who haven't been to the earth before. And so they will often bring a friend with them, a soul who perhaps has had more experience on the earth and is more almost like a guide, but they literally bring a friend with them. Like that often happens. There can be, if you want to expand your mind into past lives and things like that, there can be some different karmic, soul business that was unfinished and needs completion or needs to be explored in a different way. And coming as multiples can give them the opportunity for that. Some souls who have had really bad experiences on the earth, and in families with a lot of really early childhood trauma in previous lives, can choose to come in as multiples, or perhaps didn't have, were only children and didn't want that experience again because it was negative for them for some reason. There's lots of reasons why souls be like, what, let's come as twins, let's come as triplets, like
Wow.
quads, twins, all of, I've seen the whole spectrum of multiples up to
Yeah.
like 8. And
Wow.
so it's very powerful. But sometimes I've found it can also be quite opportunistic as well, especially when it comes to things like IVF, where the rates of multiples are higher because of the intervention and the techniques and stuff. There are children who are willing to come, as a twin to fill a spot. There's like an opportunity there that may not have been there through, say, a natural conception. Although, obviously there's plenty of opportunity for natural multiples as well. So yeah, there's lots of different reasons, but again, I keep coming back to it's a lot around it's very interesting, should we say, to tune into these multiples as souls like them, and what they've experienced in previous lives, what they're here to learn from this life, and how like bringing a friend can
Wow.
help support them, both of them. They both benefit from that. So
Wow. Lauren, this is such an amazing interview that I have gotten lost with time and lost with you, because you have such deep insight and things that makes me go, oh wow, oh my gosh, that touched me. So thank you so much. Can you just tell me quickly, what does your typical client come to you and see you for?
yeah, sure, no worries. Yeah, most women I work with, probably I would say 50% of women I work with are trying to conceive.
Okay.
They're in their 30s or 40s and they're trying to conceive and are worried about their age and their physical health and is there even a baby around me? So I see a lot of women who are looking for some wisdom and guidance and insight into baby souls who may be in their energy field and planning a life with them. I also have a lot of women coming to me who've experienced pregnancy loss, whether through miscarriage, ectopics, termination,
Hmm.
stillbirth, neonatal loss, child loss, some even 35, 40 years down the track because they've They want to understand. They like, what happened, like what went wrong? Did I do something wrong? So
Mm-hmm.
when we can tap into a soul who's come to earth and then left again, they can offer some really profound insights into what did or didn't happen. And also women who are pregnant and are looking for some guidance around what does my baby want for their birth. And a lot of babies will share things around what type of birth they would like or would support them for their life here. The people they want present in the room, whether they want their siblings around, things like that. And also women who come with babies and children who are earthside and they're having some sort of issue. It might be a baby who hates being in the car, for example, and screams whenever the car starts moving. So we can find out, is there a past life? Is there some kind of
Ooh.
soul thing going on around that? Same if they're not eating, they're not sleeping properly. Kids, what sort of education does my child's soul need to support them in
Mm-hmm.
life here?
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
there's a whole, spectrum
Wow.
of reasons
How
from
exciting.
preconception to childhood. Yeah.
I'm so excited, and I'm so excited for so many people who are watching this who could potentially go, I need Lauren, because I think it'll be so interesting to work alongside with you, Lauren. And thank you
Yeah.
so much. Can you tell me, what is your mission? What is your mission in this world?
It's to give babies a voice. I'm very passionate about allowing these children to speak in a way that they're heard, they're seen, they're felt well beyond the physical, and I just want to be their voice. I want to be that messenger. But I also don't believe I believe everyone can do this. I believe that as mothers, like we're all able to connect with our baby's soul. We just need to clear some clutter out of the way first and
Yeah.
understand the processes. But, I think the more women who are able to connect with their children on a deeper level, the more supported and the more powerful these children are going to be in their mission and their purpose for being in the world. So if I can support them in that way, just by hearing them, seeing them, feeling them, then that's my job done, mission accomplished.
Wow. Lauren, I had another question, but I have so much questions. I could open up another question. But I just want to ask you lastly, before we go,
Yes.
what makes you happy other than being a baby soul communicator? What makes you go, ah, happiness?
Oh, there's a few things. Um, that's it. Just trying to think where to start. There's like all these things popping into my mind. Oh, I have to say, and I don't know, this probably sounds really boring, but something that makes me so happy is space. And it doesn't matter whether that is me hanging out in nature, walking along a stream, or here in Bali, looking out over the rice fields, really just tuning into the energy of the land makes me so happy. But I also really, really love people, the right kind of people.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah, of
I'm not
course.
one, as you've probably noticed, I'm not one for small
Yeah,
talk and
yeah,
don't care
yeah,
much
yeah,
about the weather, but what really
yeah.
up and ignites my own soul is having these types of conversations and really connecting with and communicating with other people who want to dive deep and want to connect in a really powerful and also authentic way. That's another thing that makes me really happy.
That's lovely. I always like to take people back from this podcast to themselves again and ask them what
Yeah.
makes people happy. What makes you happy? Speaking about connection, tell our audience on Instagram, Facebook, everywhere, how can they find Lauren to work alongside you?
Yeah, for sure. So I mostly hang out on Instagram. My business is Born Energy, so you can find me there. I am on Facebook, but yeah, mostly on Instagram these days. I have a website which is bornenergy.com.au. And I also have just started a podcast just in the last, actually launched it last week, where it's just me answering questions because I know so
Amazing.
many women out there have questions around all of this. And sometimes these types of conversations can bring up more questions than answers a lot of the time. So I just wanted to create a space where I can answer these questions. And again, being that messenger or that bridge between worlds and answer these questions in a way that's practical, human, not too airy fairy. So yeah, so that's called Babies from Beyond on
Babies from
Instagram.
Beyond.
Babies from Beyond on Spotify and Apple at the moment. And yeah, brand new, literally one episode out as we're recording
Okay.
this. So yeah.
Okay. That's great, Lauren. Thank you. And what a great name, Babies from Beyond. I love that name. I love that name. Lauren, it's been absolutely magical today. So I wanted to share and say thank you so much for sharing your wisdom, for sharing your knowledge, for sharing that deep connection that we all
Oh, you're
have. And also just to remember that little babies have a voice. And that is, I think, that was the take for me away from today. Babies have a voice.
Oh, absolutely. And thank you so much for giving me this opportunity to be able to share their voices and share their wisdom again with those who need to hear it or can benefit from it. So thank you. It's been a really great conversation.
Thank you, Lauren, and thank you for joining Alchemy Within today. Speak to you soon.
Bye.